Margaret Davis sat in the elegant bank lobby, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. At 52, she had learned to recognize danger in the smallest gestures. Today, that danger wore a familiar face. Her daughter, Claire, had insisted on accompanying her to the bank. "Just some routine paperwork, Mom," Claire had said that morning, her smile bright and reassuring. Margaret wanted to believe her. She desperately wanted to believe that her only child, her beautiful, accomplished daughter, had finally moved past the financial troubles that had plagued her for years. But something felt wrong. Claire stood beside her now, perfectly poised in a designer suit Margaret knew she couldn't afford. Her husband, Derek, lingered near the entrance, his eyes constantly scanning the room. Margaret had never liked Derek. There was something hollow behind his charm, something that reminded her of a locked door with no key. "Here, Mom." Claire pressed a pen into Margaret's hand, her grip just a touch too firm. "Just sign where I've marked. It's routine paperwork for updating your account." Margaret looked down at the documents. The words blurred together. She felt Claire's hand on her arm, gentle at first, then pressing harder. "Just sign, Mom. It's routine." That's when Derek moved closer. His hand found Margaret's other arm, and he squeezed. Not violently, but with enough pressure to send a clear message. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't paperwork. This was something else entirely. Her mind raced back through the past 6 months. The unexpected visits, Claire's sudden interest in her finances, the questions about her savings, her investments, the life insurance policy Margaret had maintained since her husband Thomas had passed away 3 years ago. Thomas. God, how she missed him. He would have known what to do. He always knew. The pressure on her arm intensified. Margaret looked into her daughter's eyes and saw something that broke her heart. Desperation mixed with something darker. Greed, perhaps. Or fear. "Sign it, Mom," Claire whispered, her voice strained. Margaret's hand shook as she held the pen. The cashier, a young woman named Jennifer, was helping another customer. The bank manager's office door stood open. Across the lobby. In that moment, Margaret made her decision. She had always been a woman who chose kindness over confrontation. She had raised Claire alone after divorcing her father when Claire was just 7. She had worked 2 jobs to send her daughter to college. She had forgiven Claire's mistakes, her poor choices in men, her mounting debts. But this was different. Margaret's hand moved, but not to sign the document. Instead, she pulled a deposit slip toward her and wrote quickly, "Help. I'm being forced to sign." She folded it carefully and caught Jennifer's eye. The young cashier approached with a professional smile. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Davis?" Margaret handed her the note along with her identification card. "I need to make a deposit, dear." Jennifer's smile didn't waver as she unfolded the note, but Margaret saw her eyes change, saw the recognition, the understanding. "Of course, Mrs. Davis. Let me just get the manager for you. This will require his approval." Claire's grip on her arm tightened. "Mom, we don't need," but Jennifer was already walking toward the manager's office, moving with purpose. Robert Mitchell, the bank manager, was a man in his 60s who had known Margaret for 20 years. He emerged from his office, and Margaret saw his expression shift as Jennifer whispered to him. His eyes found Margaret's, then moved to Claire and Derek. "Mrs. Davis," he said calmly, his voice steady and warm. "Why don't you come to my office? We can handle this more comfortably there." Then his eyes moved to the security guard near the door, and he gave an almost imperceptible nod. What happened next unfolded like a slow-motion dream. The security guard pressed a silent alarm. Within minutes, police officers entered the bank. Claire's face drained of color. Derek tried to leave, but the guard blocked his path. Margaret sat in Robert's office, a cup of tea in her shaking hands, as the truth spilled out. The documents Claire had wanted her to sign would have transferred Margaret's entire savings, nearly $300,000, into an account Claire and Derek had opened in her name. "They're in debt," Margaret told the detective quietly. "Gambling debts, I think." "Derek's debts. And Claire. Claire got caught up in it." The detective, a kind-faced woman named Sarah Rodriguez, nodded gently. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Davis. This took courage, but it didn't feel like courage. It felt like betrayal." Even though Margaret knew she wasn't the betrayer, the legal proceedings took months. Claire and Derek were charged with attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. Margaret attended every hearing, her heart breaking a little more each time she saw her daughter in handcuffs. But something else was happening to Dot in the quiet of her grief. Margaret found herself returning to the bank, not for business, but to thank Robert and Jennifer. Those brief visits became longer conversations. She learned that Jennifer was putting herself through nursing school, that Robert had lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago and understood loneliness. "You showed real strength that day," Robert told her over coffee one afternoon, 6 months after the incident. "Not everyone can stand up to the people they love." "It didn't feel like strength," Margaret admitted. "It felt like losing my dog, May," Robert said gently. "But sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means letting people face the consequences of their choices." Claire received probation and mandatory financial counseling. Derek served 18 months. Margaret attended Claire's counseling sessions, not as an enabler, but as a witness to her daughter's slow, painful journey toward accountability. The first real conversation came a year later, in a small cafe near Margaret's home. "I'm sorry, Moms," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I was scared. And Derek convinced me that you wouldn't miss the money, that you'd understand. That I loved you enough to sacrifice everything," Margaret finished quietly. "And I do love you that much, Claire. But love isn't the same as allowing yourself to be destroyed." Claire nodded, unable to speak. "I forgive you," Margaret said, reaching across the table to take her daughter's hand. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means moving forward with wisdom." 2 years after that terrible day, in the bank, Margaret stood in a small community center, addressing a group of seniors about financial safety and elder abuse. "Trust your instincts," she told them, "and know that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary." Claire sat in the back row, listening. She had divorced Derek, rebuilt her credit, and found work as a counselor helping others escape abusive relationships. The road back to each other had been long and painful, but they were walking it together now, with honesty instead of illusions. After the presentation, Robert approached Margaret with a warm smile. Over the past 2 years, their friendship had deepened into something more, something neither of them had expected to find again. "Proud of you," he said simply. Margaret looked at her daughter across the room, then back at Robert. "Life has a strange way of teaching us what we need to learn," she said. "Sometimes the greatest act of love is pressing the alarm." Claire met her eyes and smiled, a real smile this time, free of desperation or deceit. In that moment, Margaret understood that she hadn't lost her daughter that day in the bank. She had saved them both. The journey toward healing had required courage, boundaries, and the wisdom to know that true kindness sometimes wears the face of difficult choices. But in the end, both mother and daughter had found something precious: the freedom that comes from facing the truth.